What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Sunnydale Live. So today, we're talking about the pilot, the first episode, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Welcome to the Hellmouth. So let's get into it. First of all, right off the bat, the opening scene of Buffy the Vampire Slayer might be, in my estimation, one of the best opening scenes of any show. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not my favorite pilot ever. Like, to me, the gold standard of pilots is The Shield. That's my favorite pilot. But the opening scene of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where where this guy breaks into the school and he takes a date, and you're like, what's going on? And you think she's in danger, and he's kind of portrayed as the predator, and then she just flips the script and she eats him. You didn't see that coming. You didn't expect it. It was just out of nowhere, and it was kind of brilliant. It perfectly encapsulates what the entire show is, which is turning the stereotype on its head. And they do that right out the gate with Darla killing that guy. The show wastes no time in getting into its essential thesis of what it is all about. And part of me just loves that. I think that's a brilliant way to start an episode. I think it's a brilliant way to start a universe. And that scene kind of encapsulates everything that the show is trying to say in like just a few moments. It's brilliant. I do love on these early seasons where you're in every generation of Slayers. Like, I love that. I wish they never got rid of that. I think that's so brilliant. The opening credits are genius, as always. The music, everything about it. Just within a few moments of the show, you're just engaged. You're hooked. You're like, whoa, this is awesome. Then you get to the dream sequence, which sets up pretty much the entire season. Like, there's clips from the rest of the season in Buffy's dreams, which I think is kind of cool. Right off the bat, almost immediately, you like Joyce better than Buffy's parents in the movies. She's, actually a mother. She's trying to be firm, but not too firm. You could see she's trying to, like, give Buffy her space to grow, but also, like, my daughter just got in trouble. She burnt down a gym. I don't know what's going on with her. I gotta kind of keep a heavy hand on her. I love that. I love the way that they play Joyce in this episode. I thought it was really good. I loved the introduction of Xander just rolling down the sidewalk on a skateboard, and then he sees Buffy and just boom right into the handles of the stairs. Why am I drawing a blank on what it's called? I do wonder why Xander, for the rest of the series, even into the comic books, is never referenced with a skateboard ever again. It's something they introduced his character on, a skateboard, and then it just goes away and is never even hinted at again. He tried skateboarding once, got hurt, and was like, yo, I'm done. I'm never even looking at a skateboard again. It's just such a weird choice. Then you meet Willow and god awful clothes she's wearing. You meet Jesse. They really set up all these characters. Boom, boom, boom. So Joss Whedon must really have this thing about principals trying too hard. Because on the movie, obviously, you have the principal who's trying way too hard to be cool and friendly with the students. And then you get Flutie. When Buffy meets with him, he makes a big show of tearing up her transcript and is like, you get a fresh start here. I'm not going to judge you by what you did at your old school. That doesn't matter. This is a new school. This is a new start. And she calls him Principal Flutie. He's like, students are free to call me Bob. And then when she calls him Bob, he goes, but they don't. And then he starts reading the transcript and he's like, huh. And then he tapes it back together and puts it in the folder. I'm just like, I love it. All that talk of, I'm not going to judge you by your past. That's not relevant here. It's a new day. You're a new person. And this is a new start. Goes out the window when he sees she burnt the gym down. I don't know why that part always cracks me up. But I really do love that part. I always thought that part was just brilliant. One of the best lines of dialogue I've ever forgotten. Where we're then in Buffy's class and she's sitting next to Cordelia Chase. And the teacher's like, the fun part of the Black Death is, and it's like, what? Or what fun part is the bubonic plague? There's nothing fun about it. It's such a weird line and just so like out there. You really do gotta love like the way Joss Whedon plays around with words and like stuff like that, like the dialogue, the cadence of how the characters talk. It's pretty genius. I think it's a large part of what makes the show stand so long against stand against the test of time and just resonate with so many people because it's very much its own thing. It's kind of self-contained in its own little universe, and it's to be fair, it's kind of brilliant. Um, Buffy goes and you see Cordelia. It always trips me out watching it again that Buffy's first like kind of friend in Sunnydale's Cordelia Chase because the two of them don't get along at all. And it's interesting that there's a world where they were like best friends. Like that's the first person she connected with. And it's not until she sees Cordelia kind of tearing Willow down for no reason other than how Willow dresses that Buffy's kind of like, oh, I don't like this lady. I don't really want to fuck with her. You see the friendship deteriorate in that one scene. Then she meets Giles and he brings the big not Buffy book, I'm sorry, she's the big vampire book down, and Buffy's like, no, I don't want to deal with this, leaves out. Her first meeting with Xander, which is just kind of adorable. I've never been that tongue tied in my life, and it's kind of like it's endearing. People hate Xander, but it's endearing. Like, can I have you? Like the first thing he says is, "Can I help you?" And then he's just like, "We both go to school." And I'm just like, "Oh my man, like just stop talking. Just please stop talking." It's so there's so much compounded into this first episode that's just kind of brilliant. You really get a feel for all these characters, who they are and what they want and what their motivations are. And it's all set up so quickly without wasting a lot of time. A lot of times shows are trying to figure out who they are. But Buffy kind of comes out the gate. I mean, that's not to say there are some episodes in season one that I do think are a little weaker. But the pilot knew what it was, knew what it wanted to do, and it came out swinging. And there's not a lot of shows that land with that level of, you know what I mean? And then like the very next scene, you see Buffy go up to Willow and kind of befriend her and was like, oh, I mean, she did it under the guise of like, can you help me with homework and this and that. And I'm sure Buffy wanted the help for the homework. I'm sure she didn't just make it all up, but I do think a big part of it was she saw the way how Cordelia treated Willow and was like, I'm going to be friends with her. And part of it just kind of makes you love Buffy, makes her very endearing, and already sets her off as so different from the Buffy we saw in the movie. Like, completely different characters. Now, you could say that's because the growth that happened in that movie, especially when you take into, like, the origin comic, which is very similar to that, and even in some flashbacks later on as the show progresses, you see Buffy used to be that vain, like Cordelia, and you see how she kind of evolved because of the experiences that happened to her. So reaching out to Willow, who's someone else who is kind of down and out and people don't treat her well, I think Buffy connected to that. But it just immediately makes you like, oh, I like this woman. I like this girl. She's a good person. And she wants to be encompassing and encouraging to others. And it makes her stronger. And it adds so much to her character, in my opinion. And then Xander and Jesse come, and Xander's again a bumbling idiot. Oh, and he gives Buffy the steak back, which is just like, what was going through his head? He was like, I made a joke about a little fence, but it's just like, this girl's carrying around a steak, and her excuse of like, oh, this is what we use for self-defense in LA, and it's just like, okay, so what, in LA you're just staking random people? It's just so random, and everyone just kind of goes with it. It's odd. It is really, it's weird, but it's funny. And you kind of like, all right, yeah, you kind of enjoy it. Um, but what trips me out is then they're like, oh, not much happens in this one Starbuck town. It's the Hellmouth. For all 7 seasons, it's constantly like weird shit happening. So for the statement to be like, and then even in this episode and the next episode, they reestablish that this town has a long history of fucked up shit happening. So to right off the bat be like, oh, nothing happens here, and it's like, well, it goes against everything that's ever said about this town moving forward. That line goes against. But I do kind of, but I don't know. They're trying really hard to hammer home Sunnydale's a small town. It's a very tiny town. Like they really want to nail that home. Um, which I guess it must be because you have the Bronze, which makes no sense to me. It's a place where high school kids go and hang out, but it's also a bar where grown adults go and drink. And it's just like, how is all of this allowed in one place? I don't think they would generally allow high school kids to hang out at a bar with drunk adults. It just seems weird. Like maybe those should be different places, but they just conflate it all together. But I guess that's what the Bronze is, right? Um, so backtrack. Cordelia comes and tells them what happens, and you see Buffy and Cordelia's relationship really take a down note here because Cordelia's like, "Why are you hanging out with these people?" And Cordelia tells her that they found a dead body in the locker, and Buffy starts asking way too many questions, real morbid, and you could tell creep Cordelia out. But here's my question, and is this like a logical question? They find a dead body stuffed in a locker. And yeah, they canceled gym class, but they kept the school open and they're not like, hey, we're going to investigate the dead body. Maybe we should get these kids out of here. They're like, nah, you guys go to your next class. Everything's fine. It's such a weird. And then Buffy breaks into the locker room to investigate the body. So they didn't have anyone come and collect the body, like the coroners or anything like that. There's not police guarding the crime scene. They just leave the body there. It's just, there's some logicals there. But then we get to my estimation, one of the most memorable scenes of the pilot, where Buffy just confronts Giles, and we learn that Buffy's been a Slayer for a while, and she's done her duty, but she doesn't want to do it anymore. It harpens back to what they were talking about in the movie, where she just wants to be normal, and she just wants to live her life, and she doesn't want all this extra stuff. She never asked to be chosen. She doesn't want to be special. She just wants to be a normal high school girl going about her normal business. And she doesn't think it's fair that fate has bestowed this upon her. And it really, you feel sympathy for her. We meet Luke, which then leads us to meeting the Master, the big bad for the season. And I do love the religious overtones. Like, it's not Christianity religion. It's this weird vampire religion, but it's very much tradition and scripture and prophecies. And it's a cool concept. You don't see a lot like vampire religion, and you got this weird devout guy. It's interesting. It's something like even on a lot of vampire and supernatural shows, you don't see that. So it was a cool way to introduce this villain and to give him this weird, unique personality. I love Angel's introduction into the series. Buffy's just walking, I believe it's when she's walking to the Bronze, and you see someone following her, and you think it's something to do with the Master, and you're kind of worried about her, and the tension spiking, and then she goes in an alleyway, and she looks around, and you're like, oh shit, she's stuck. And then the guy comes in, and for the first time you see Angel, and then she attacks him from behind, like she got the drop on him. And you kind of see their chemistry building. He gives her a cross, and he warns her about the harvest, and kind of hints at the Hellmouth. It sets a lot up, and it's interesting. I think it's one of the better introductions to a character. Um, it's You see that scene and you don't think, oh, that's this dude's gonna carry his own show for 5 years. It doesn't strike you as that, but it is a great introduction to a character who would go on to be so important in the lore. Um, I love, I love when Willow's like, me and Xander used to date until he stole my Barbie, and she's like, we were five, and it's just so random. But you could definitely tell she's crushing on Xander. Like, they set that up early. Um, Buffy's advice to her, seize the day because tomorrow you might be dead, is still one of my favorite lines. But then it goes back to the very next thing that happens. It goes back to what I said about what is the bronze? Like, how does this place exist? Because she looks upstairs and Giles is just walking around, and it's just like, something about this is weird. You're letting high school kids and drunk adults mingle. It just seems odd. And it's just like, how do you prevent these kids from getting alcohol? I didn't see any stamps on their hands, any wristbands. And it's like, I understand when I was younger, I used to go to clubs and there are drunk adults there and teenagers, yeah, but they were 18. They weren't letting 16-year-old kids walking in there. It's weird. It just doesn't seem safe. Like, what if some drunk adult starts getting belligerent and attacking people? You're having children running around. It's weird. I don't know. Uh, but I do love that Buffy and Giles start talking, and Buffy's like, I'm not saying I'm not going to slay vampires ever again. I just want to retire. And then she notices that Willow finally took her advice, and it got Willow in trouble, and now Buffy has to go save her. We see Jesse hitting it off with get rejected by Cordelia because he has like the biggest crush in the world on her. I mean, I can't say I blame him. Charisma Carpenter is beautiful. Um, and then he finds this other girl to talk to, and it turns out to be Darla, the same vampire from the beginning of the episode. And you're like, oh shit, Jesse. This part really cements her and Cordelia's friendship. It's never gonna be what it should have been, what it could have been. She hears someone behind her, grabs her, throws her against the wall, and is about to stake her. And then it's Cordelia, and I love this line. What's your childhood drama? Or what's your childhood drama or whatever? Like, it's just that's a brilliant line. And it's so funny. This is like, yeah, Cordelia and Buffy are never going to be friends. They're never going to be cool. And as the show progresses, like, they do kind of become friendly. But the friendship that was hinted at in the first episode never really comes to fruition. And between Buffy's weird, morbid curiosity about the dead body and her almost killing her, it's kind of easy to see why, isn't it? Like, you get it. It definitely makes sense. Buffy runs out to find Willow, runs into Xander, who confronts her because when she was talking to Giles about being the Slayer, Xander in the library, Xander overheard everything. And he's like, you're nonsense. There's no such thing as a Slayer. There's no such thing as vampires. So dismissive of everything. And then she's like, Willow's in trouble. And Xander's like, well, let's go find her. And you do kind of love that. Like, he's there for his friends. I really do think Xander is unfairly treated by the fan base. I think he's a good character. And I think he has a lot of redeeming qualities. And I think people just enjoy hating on him to hate on him. And it's insane. I think Xander is a better human being than Willow. But if you were to go on any Buffy group, and it's the exact opposite. Like, they all swear up and down Willow's a saint and Xander's a monster. But throughout the series, there's very few instances of Willow doing anything that she doesn't directly benefit from. Willow is incredibly selfish. You don't see it on this first episode at all. Like, that doesn't seem to be her character at all. But as the show progresses, you start to see it more and more. And I find the hatred for Xander and the love for Willow to be kind of odd, to put it bluntly. It's a little odd. But I do have to question Willow. She's portrayed as this very intelligent, smart person. I get she's a little bit of a loser, doesn't really know how to socialize. But you just met this guy, and he's like, let's cut through the cemetery to get to the ice cream parlor, which you clearly established is in a whole other direction, with some dude she barely met, and she goes with him. I'm glad she finally was like, this seems weird, when he's like, hey, let's go in this abandoned crypt. But why? Willow, run! Don't go into cemeteries with random dudes you just met. It just seems like a bad idea. And then he kind of throws her into the crib. Darla's there. Jesse comes in, already being bitten and had some of his blood drained by Darla. And it's like, oh shit, what's going to happen next? And then Buffy and Xander come to the rescue. Buffy slays the vampire Willow was talking to, taking on Darla, kicking Darla's ass. And then out of nowhere, Luke comes. And Luke just starts manhandling Buffy while Xander and the others run. And it's like, shit, Buffy has no chance. And I mean, this episode literally ends on a cliffhanger where Luke throws Buffy into the coffin and jumps on top of her. And you're like, oh shit, like, what's Buffy gonna do? And then it ends. And you're like, no, what happens next? And that's how you should end an episode, especially a pilot. Leave them wanting more, because that episode definitely leaves you wanting more. You're like, what? Like, this vampire's stronger than Buffy, and he's kicking her ass, and what does she do? You see Xander get Jesse and Willow out there, so you're like, all right, all the other people are safe, but what happens to Buffy? How does she get out of this? What's going on? It's an intense ending, and I really do have to say, like, this is a great pilot. It establishes so much lore. It sets up the characters. It very much sets up Willow, Xander, Buffy, Cordelia, Giles, even Joyce. All have very distinct personalities, are all very much established into versions of who they will become. I mean, Willow grows a lot. Giles, he grows a little bit, but really what happens with Giles is they start peeling off layers, and we start to see who he really is, and that this person that he portrays himself is isn't really who he is, but it's who he tries to portray himself as, and we start to see that there's a lot more to him than we think. But everybody's clearly established. The lore is clearly established. They do so much work in this pilot, and it's really brilliant. Watching this episode, it's easy to see why this show becomes so beloved and why so many people, even after all these years, gravitate to the show, because everything that makes this show great is present in this first episode. It's all there. There are things that become better. There are things that get expanded upon. But the groundwork for everything this show goes on to be is all there in that first 40-some minutes. They put all that work in, and it pays off. But, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think of the episode. Till next time, till tomorrow, I'm Jonathan. Give us legends. Oh, actually, hold on. Most important thing of all, at the very end of the episode, and I'll end this episode with it because I love it. You see the Gur Arg for the first time.